Sal Barry and Tim Parish. This is the Puck Junk Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. I'm Sal Barry, and with me is Tim Parish and Clemente Lisi. And today we are going to talk about the 2023 National Sports Collectors Convention that just took place last week and this past weekend. Gentlemen, how are you doing? You were both at the National with me a few of those days. How you feeling now? Start with you, Clemente, since you're the special guest. A special guest host.
I'm pretty happy, but still a little tired. I think that the national hangover is still there a little bit.
Tim?
I'm tired. I'm still tired, actually.
Yeah, because you had to get up early on Saturday to clean up all the debris that the storm had left around your house. I guess another tree fell or something.
Yeah, it wasn't our tree, though. It was a branch from another tree, another mystery tree from somewhere else.
I think there's a saying, if a tree falls in Lowell, Indiana, does it hit Tim's house?
Well, we've gotten lucky so far. Lots of trees that were down, but none of them hit our house. In fact, there was one at the end of the block. So the guy at the end of the block is, he's like a car guy, and he has a bunch of crazy cars, including the General Lee and Corvettes and all kinds of stuff. There's a million cars parked there. His tree went down, and it missed everything. I couldn't believe it. Didn't hit a thing. That took me forever, and then by the time I actually got out of here, it was, heck, when did I even show up? It was like 11 something by the time
And you
I
must
showed
have been
up.
Cleaning for a few hours, because you texted me first thing in the morning, and you're like, roofing shingles got ripped off of our roof, and
Yeah, our gutter was torn off. I mean,
a recycle bin got slammed into the side of your house and cracked the siding.
which also wasn't ours. It was somebody else's. My plan was to get up. I was going to go to the bank. I was going to go to get gas. I was going to do all that stuff and then hit the road. And I had to do all that after. And by the time I do it after, now there's people at the gas station, and there's people in the drive-thru, and there's people at the bank. And it's like, come on. But anyway, I eventually made it. So I was there a day and a half, I guess.
I mean, you were there pretty long. You were there 11, almost to the end, 6. I think you left at around 5. So the first day, and then the second day, you were there pretty much the whole time.
Right.
And Clemente, you were there I remember you flew in on Thursday morning and then came straight to the National.
Yeah, that's right. I flew in from New York Thursday early morning because you want to get those early flights because of the whole weather delays and all that. And then I went right to the booth, and then I left Sunday kind of in the middle of the day. At that point, I was out of money and I was exhausted.
I got there Wednesday because I set up to sell. So Wednesday, I got there around 9:45. And, me and my friend that I set up with, we unloaded his van, set everything up. I mean, it takes time. It takes time because you're unloading. We're basically where we unloaded was across the hall. I mean, it was not a super long walk, but we probably had to make 5 or 6 trips each. I mean, it was work. I mean, fortunately, when we packed up, they let him drive his van into the hall because by then a lot of people had already left, and that's what everybody was doing. So, packing up was a little easier because he was able to drive in his van, but unpacking, unloading, and then setting up, that takes a long time. It takes a long time. I mean, you're not just setting up, just putting out the stuff on your tables. I mean, arranging the cards in the case, Clemente, as you see, that takes time and effort. Setting up grid wall to hang the T-shirts. I mean, all these things that you do as a dealer. And it's funny because there's always a point where it's just okay, I can't take this anymore. I'll just throw this aside and deal with it later. And then it either never gets dealt with, or I find it a day later and go, oh, I should put that in the case. Or somebody says, do you have this thing? And I'm like, oh, yeah, let me find where I threw it. Yeah, Wednesday I was there pretty much just before 10 a.m. to, I think the show went till 8. So we didn't get out of there till about 8:30, 8:45. And then, yeah, I mean, it's a longer day for dealers because we get there earlier, leave a little later. But yeah, it's a grind. You guys said you had a hangover. Monday, I felt hungover. I didn't do anything. I stayed home. I watched Netflix. I ate. And I just kind of puttered around my house in my pajamas Like I had a hangover minus the nausea and the alcohol, you know.
Monday morning, I did have a hangover, but that's because I was drinking that night. So, but I went to work anyway. So there you go.
So I want to give a couple of quick shout outs. A lot of people who stopped by my booth to say hi. Maybe they bought some stuff. Maybe they just hung out and chit-chatted for a while. So, and, you know, some people I just got to say thanks to for their help and their support. So want to give shout outs to Scott, Frank, and Brian at AU Sports, who let me set up with them. That's huge. I want to thank Jeff, Paul, Sophia, and Troy at Upper Deck. I want to thank Chris and Karen at Niagara Falls Sports Cards, Aaron and Jeff Nowak at Slab Stocks. Jeff interviewed me for an interview that is on the Slab Stocks YouTube channel. I will send you a link to that.
Which, by the way, you didn't answer my question. When did that happen? We had to have wandered off.
That was Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Where the
wandered
heck
off.
was I?
You
Okay.
were buying stuff.
All right. Well,
Tim, you were making the deal of the show, the deal of the century.
the deal of the century. That was when that went down. Okay.
Maybe.
I want to give a shout out to Barry and Stefan at Check Out My Cards, Mark Petrie at Trees Collectibles, Greg McLaughlin at the Rebel Base Card Podcast. He has a podcast about Star Wars trading cards, but we'd always run into each other at various nationals, and he interviewed me for his podcast. I will put a link to that in the notes as well. Greg was also giving out this really cool giveaway. It was a wax pack of 9 custom Star Wars trading cards designed to look like old Star Wars cards. One picture's like one of the artists who did the artwork for the Topps cards, and another one pictured like Ewan McGregor on stage at one of the Star Wars celebrations and like stuff like that. So, you know, here I'm giving away my little 6-card set. He's giving away a 9-card set that came in a wax wrapper, really a printer paper, but still a wrapper, came with a sticker, came with a few vintage cards just mixed in. It was a really cool giveaway. I want to thank Ted at BCW Supplies. I want to thank Jeff Owens, editor of Sports Collectors Digest, and then a few Puck Junk fans who dropped by: Sean Sullivan, Kevin Paulson, Andrew Chevrier, and then Lucas and Joe Pospisil, who all came and said hi and hung out. And then there were like a bunch of other people who did too. And it's all just a blur. I think next year I'm going to have a guest book, like sign my guest book. Ever see that at like a wedding when people come in, they just so that I could thank people for dropping by. And then of course you guys came and hung out for a while, and that really helped.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Where's our thanks? Jeez.
Yes, I'd like to thank Tim and Clemente for being on this podcast with me right now. And also, so like Tim made a couple of sales for me, like when I stepped away to go to the bathroom and then I came back, Tim's like, yeah, I sold some things. But then Clemente, this was funny because you looked at one of my display cases and you're like, Sal, you're not maximizing your space. Here, let me do that. I said, you said, give me everything you want to fit in this case. And it was just like, it was like a set of Topps hockey cards from '68, a set of Topps baseball cards, a bunch of little sets, some oversized cards, just kind of random stuff. And you like rearranged it so nicely. And then Tim said, dude, if 3 things sell from that, I'm going to laugh. And then immediately, like 30 seconds later, a guy comes up and he's like, hi, I'd like to buy those 2 WHA hockey team sets of the Phoenix Roadrunners. Yep. And then at the end of the show, I sold that oversized Patrick Kane card from that case. So actually,
I was gonna ask you how did that work out, but now it sounds like it did work out. So
yeah,
I'm happy. I'm happy.
Sold a few things. I mean, nice. It didn't make me rich, but it got rid of things. So that's
exactly.
Good.
It makes room for other stuff in the future.
What do you guys want to talk about first? I mean, I have some notes, but I've been doing all the talking, so have at it. I mean, Clemente, you came in on Thursday, so you kind of came in when the show was really ramping up, because Wednesday it was kind of slow. Now, it was slow, and yet it was busier than a Saturday at a typical national. One of the dealers told me, he's like, I shot video of the 2015 national, and he's like, and this is busier on the Wednesday than on the Saturday. I don't know if he was exaggerating, but I mean, this broke the record for the most visited national, and you came in right as it was heating up, literally and figuratively.
Let's talk about the fact that it was much larger than any national before. So I think people knew that and thought, okay, there's more space, so there'll be more people will come. The truth is, there was not more space. There were more people, and there were a lot of nooks and crannies and a lot of hidden places. And Tim knows that it took He came a second day. Basically, it was like going to a different card show on the other side of the building. So it was like a second card show. I will say, I think Thursday, Friday were busier than Saturday. And I thought Saturday would be the busiest day. Now, Saturday, I saw more kids and more dads with kids and moms with kids. But I think a lot of people thought, let's preempt all this by coming on Thursday, coming on Friday. And I thought that it was really super crowded. And I was talking to dealers too, and they said they were pretty happy. And you can tell because they were making deals with people. They were more open to making deals because they had made their money by Friday. I think some of these guys, I think they made a lot of money. And then the weekend was gravy. But like I said, I think the location was ideal. I think a lot of people drove in, which is easier to buy bigger stuff, that kind of thing. I mean, I flew in, so it was harder for me to buy bigger items or more wax, for example. I don't want to carry all that stuff. But I thought it was impressive. I mean, I'm comparing it to last year in Atlantic City, and I think this totally blew that show out of the water, totally. And I think it's probably the best card show I've ever been to in my life. I mean, it really was extraordinary. It was like a card show on steroids, or like a national on steroids. It was really big. And I wonder in the future, whether it's that venue or somewhere else, will they enlarge the square footage? Is it just going to work once? I'm curious about that. I mean, it just shows the hobby is in a good place. But I'm also really curious about, is it sustainable long term? Will it get smaller? I don't know what the footprint in Cleveland is like. So we'll see.
Well, just to piggyback on what you're saying, they announced that it was a record crowd. So knowing what we already know of when the record crowd was, and that was the Anaheim show, that means there was roughly 100,000 people at this show from Wednesday to Sunday. So that's a lot of people to shove in that place in a normal situation. But like you said, they increased the square footage. There was almost 600,000 square feet of space.
Over 600,000.
So you have the main show floor, and then you have those subsidiary areas where they would usually have at any given time the autograph space, or in recent years the Breakers Pavilion and that kind of stuff. But then all the way on the other side across the entryway on opposite of the escalators, there was a whole nother room that I didn't even know about until the end after walking through the entire show floor. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I made it through here in half a day. Oh, wait, no, I didn't, because I was looking for other dealers and vendors and stuff. And I'm like, why aren't they here? I thought they were here. And sure enough, they were in the other room. So one day at the National is tough to go and see everything in a normal situation. One day at the National this year would have been impossible, like completely impossible because of the size. You're trying to wind your way through in and out, trying to figure out the layout, and even with the map, trying to figure out where everything is. It was crazy. Couple that with 100,000 people shoved in there. Now, I was only there Saturday and Sunday. When I was there, I thought it was fairly busy on Saturday, especially towards the middle part of the day. I'm not saying Sunday was a ghost town by any means, because I think it was still fairly busy for a Sunday, because most shows, any show, national or otherwise, is usually dead on a Sunday because people have already come and gone and dealers start to pack up early and all of that. And you had that here too. But there was still quite a bit of people there on Sunday. I mean, it was pretty good foot traffic, I thought.
One thing I'll interject, Clemente, I'll agree with you. I feel like Friday was busier than Saturday. And looking just at my notes from the past two nationals that I've done as a seller, Friday was the busy day in 2021. Sorry, the busiest day in 2021. And it was the busiest day in 2022, at least for me, as far as like number of people that bought stuff from me. Those were my high point days, right? Now, everybody's going to be different, of course. And if a dealer sells I don't have a $10,000 card, but I'll just give you an example. If a dealer sells a $10,000 card on a Wednesday, that's going to be their best day, but not necessarily their busiest day. But like this show on Friday, and then the Fridays of the previous two nationals were always those days where like it would start at 9:30. And then I'd look up and the next thing it'd be like 2:00. And I'd be like, oh my God, I haven't gone to the bathroom. I haven't eaten. All I've done is just constantly like deal with people. I mean, as a dealer does, you deal with the customers. And so it's like I didn't really get a break. So was Thursday busy? Yeah. Was Saturday busy? Yeah. Was Sunday busy? It wasn't as busy because I was able to slip away a few times and Well, like Friday, I think I did some purchases, or excuse me, Saturday and Sunday. And as far as like the dealers packing up on Sunday, packing up early, I don't feel like they were packing up because it was slow. They were probably packing up because they probably had made a lot of money and said, you know what? I'm going to start packing at 2:00. I don't want to wait till 5:00. I want to get a 3-hour head start because I'm driving 14 hours to get home. So I think that was the reason. Whereas other times, like I've been at Chicago Sports Spectaculars where the show is slow. They had one on Father's Day weekend back in 2022. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And like Saturday by noon, it was dead. And like people were packing up. It was pretty sad.
I
It
would
went
think
to
the
like
show
4.
promoters would have rules in their contract that say you can't pack up early.
Now, we were talking about that with the dealer. Remember, he was saying that they do tell you to not pack up early, but they don't really penalize you if you do.
Well, yeah, he was basically saying that they don't really enforce what's going on, as they should. So who knows? Next year with under new management, maybe they will. Maybe they'll have a setup a little different. And he wasn't the only dealer, because I know the dealer you're talking about. I talked to some other ones that said kind of the same thing about pack in and like load in and load out, about how they were doing it in Atlantic City versus how they do it here, where it's more of a free for all. That sounds a lot more organized and makes a lot more sense for a show of this size. Because if you have 700 vendors all trying to get out the same doors at the same time, that's not helping anybody at all.
There was some displeasure about the temperature in the building. Now imagine that, a bunch of card collectors congregating in a space and being hot. Kidding aside, they couldn't figure out the air conditioning because it was pretty freaking hot outside. It was like 90 or 100 degrees outside. So you had like, I don't want to say unseasonably warm because we do have heat waves in Chicago, but this has just been crazy hot everywhere in the country. And so it's like the air conditioning that might be used to like dealing with 80 or 90 degree weather is now dealing with 100-degree weather. You know, people coming in and out, the doors opening all the time, you know, hot air coming in, and then more people in the space, more body heat. I mean, honestly, I was hot every day at the show except Sunday, because Sunday wasn't as crowded and it actually felt kind of cool. It was like comfortable. I'm like, this is what the convention should feel like, where I kind of wish I maybe brought a light sweater or like a sweat jacket or something. You know what I mean? Like, because I mean, there have been shows that I've done in the summer where I've worn like jeans because it's cool, but this was not one of them. This was, it was hot. People told me that my area was like the coolest area, not because I was standing there, but because just the ventilation was better or something. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll say this, that last year at the National, the biggest technological snafu was the Wi-Fi. And then here, I would say, at least Thursday, Friday, it was the air conditioning, because I think it was trying to compete with the number of people and the fact that it was 100 degrees outside. It was you're baking outside. And so, yeah, it was unpleasant. And there were parts of the building, like part of the corporate areas seemed very air conditioned. So I spent a lot of time there on those days. And then there were pockets where I just went and I disappeared. I thought, I can't stand here. It's unbearable. I did notice, yeah, there were parts, and Tim knows the parts that we went to on Sunday.
It was like that on Saturday. It was like that on Saturday.
Right.
Especially.
So we decided like not, and it's a shame because there were some good dealers there, but they got the short end of the stick there, I thought. And so I avoided those areas because it was crowded and it smelled, I'll be honest, and it was really hot. And I said, you know what? Let me avoid those areas. I did notice though on Saturday and Sunday, temperature did drop outside. So I think, and there's fewer people, which helps. But they brought in those fans that you bring in when there's a flood. They positioned those in those areas, and it was blowing a lot of cold air, and that helped. But of course, it was like 75 degrees, I think, on Sunday outside, or 80. So it was way better. I don't think this show the promoters could have done anything about it. I think they tried their best. You know,
no, you're shoving the most people ever into this space.
So I get it.
Something was bound to break, and it did. So I heard people talking, and apparently there were some issues with a few of the units, the AC units, and they tried to get them fixed as quickly as they could, and parts had to be ordered or something. And so the swamp coolers were working overtime, and everybody that's used to the way a swamp cooler works, at some point or another, it eventually starts blowing humid air, and it just is gross. So they can't handle everybody's hot breath all going at the same time. So
Trust me, what I was smelling was not breath.
yeah, well, in my experience there, and you guys were there longer than I was, but in my experience there, the main floor wasn't bad. I didn't really have an issue out on the main floor, anywhere on the main floor, really. It was
the
those
auxiliary
extra
areas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was those extra sections, and especially the section next to the breaker area.
Yes.
That was nuts. Like walking in there, it was like a sauna. I'm like, I don't know how these dealers could take this. Like I was looking at a couple things. There was like one table where he had like boxes of top loaders for like, I don't know, $1 or whatever. And so I started flipping through because I found a hockey box. I got like down 2 rows, and I'm like, I'm out. I got to get out of here. I can't stand here anymore.
Yeah.
So
Tim's like, I shouldn't be working up a sweat while I'm looking through cards.
well, and that's exactly it. Look, we all get demonized by the masses saying that we're a bunch of comic book nerds that just sweat and stink and don't wear deodorant and everything else. Okay, fine, I get it. But I don't want it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy because they can't get the heat and the air conditioning to function correctly.
You want to earn those sweaty arms.
Yeah, if we're going to earn it, I want to work for it. I don't want to have to just stand there and instantly melt. That's a little much. So, yeah, that wasn't pleasant. Social media, I know you guys being there probably didn't have a lot of time to see what was being said and all of that kind of stuff. Social media blew up about that whole issue. Like there were 2 issues. That was number 1, was the heat. And maybe that deterred some people over the rest of the weekend. You had the vast majority of people roll in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then by Saturday, yeah, the crowd was still fairly decent, but maybe some of those people were like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not going to tempt fate. But the second big thing that everybody was complaining about was everything was 10x comp prices. And that made me gag. Every time I saw that, gag. Gag, gag, gag.
I don't know if that was true though.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean 10X.
Everybody complaining about everybody's prices are too high.
Hmm.
And look, I've said this a million times and I'll say it again. You can't put pricing into a unitary box. It's too difficult to generalize with statements like everything is overpriced. This is a card show, okay? This is not eBay. This is not shopping online. This is not Amazon. This is not any of that. There is overhead. There is cost. There is a lot that goes into this kind of stuff. And there's a much more nuanced interpretation of what is low pricing versus high pricing versus regular pricing. There just is. Your idea of comps is coming from some online auction marketplace that's easily manipulated, as we all know, and functions on a sell by ship symbiotic relationship amongst the buyer and the sellers. One seller's looking to move product. He's incentivized by the last sale of the same product as motivation. And sure, that'll work out. But see, that's not how the real world works. And it forces undervaluation and sometimes overvaluation just based off of the perceived pressure to sell because of the marketplace. You go into a place, there's a dealer in front of you, a real life person. He has real life product. It's on the table. It's there. You can touch it. You can see it. You can smell it. You can taste it if you want, but I wouldn't recommend that. Just, it's there. You can take it with you. There's no shipping fees. There's no processing. There's none of that. But on the back end, guess what? That dealer, he's got to pay for that spot. This is the National. He's got whatever space he's got. Chances are he's paying $3,000 to $5,000 for that spot because that's the general going rate. So right there, they've got to make that money back somehow. Plus the cost of being there, the cost of getting there. There's a lot of things that go into it. So for all the people that are like bitching and moaning and saying they can buy a card online for $20, but it's 25 here or 30 here. Oh, well, you need to come down to 20. No, I'm not going to come down to 20 because that price has no overhead costs and there's more that goes into that than what's right here. And here's the card and you can take it with you today. Boom. You want it? Take it. If not, go home and do your little online shopping.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the issue I think too is that, I feel like when I go to a card show, whether it's a small one, a big one, or the national, you're paying in a way for the interaction. You see the card in hand, you get it, you buy the card, you get it in that moment. You're not paying all these extra fees and everything else. I often think that eBay prices can be inflated, obviously. I don't really trust. I know people look at the comps and they think that's the guide, like it's the old Beckett, but it's not necessarily the case. And it depends how badly you want the card. I noticed at the National, there was a lot of room for negotiation. Look, if you're trying to get like a Lionel Messi card or Shohei Ohtani, these guys are super hot right now because in their sport, they're at their peak and there's a lot of demand. Those cards were expensive. I saw one guy, he had Japanese baseball cards, which I thought was the coolest thing. And he had a Shohei Ohtani, like Japanese rookie card. It was $15,000. It was a PSA 10 card. Okay. That's too rich for my blood, but it was cool to see. And maybe he sold it, maybe he didn't. And maybe it was inflated. I don't know. But that's a special realm. I know that the cards I was looking for, I was making offers that were legit. And I was with Tim and he made offers on cards too. And they took those offers. There was room for negotiation and you can buy multiple cards. The people who think they should stay home and spend all day on eBay, that's great. But for example, even me as a traveler or even you guys, I had to fly to Chicago. I had to stay in a hotel. I spent a lot of money, right? More money than I would have on eBay, but it's for the experience too. And so you have to pay for all those things, I think. And I think that's where things get lost a little bit. Otherwise, go to your local card store and buy the card there or buy it on eBay and you can be happy.
And I agree 100% because that's essentially what I'm saying. There's other things that go into this. There's way more that goes into this. When you get that comp sale and you look and things start to become hundreds or thousands of dollars in different between live pricing and what you found, obviously you should do your research. You should possibly, that's your chance for negotiation, right? Because you're that far apart in what you think it's worth and what they think it's worth. But if there's a few dollars difference in everything else and you're going to sit there and flip through your phone for 10 minutes and go, oh, the last one sold for blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, guess what? The last one sold for that. Now there's one less buyer for it. So guess what? The price goes up. I mean, that's the reality.
Well, both of you guys work in education, or Tim, you worked as a teacher. Clemente, you're a teacher. I'm a teacher. And there's a saying, which I'm probably going to mangle, but it goes something along like the lines like this. An anecdote is not data, or the anecdote is not data. So because a card sells for, say, $50, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a $50 card. It means the card sold one time at $50. Now, if it sells a lot of times at $50, that's a trend, right? Or that's a pattern. But my question is this. If a card sells for $50 all day long, that means a lot of people want that card because it meets a certain demand. So why can't I sell mine for $60, right? It's kind of like, well, if they'll pay $50, they'll pay $60. Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes it backfires. I've tried that strategy before where I said, well, if it's sold for this, it'll sell for that. And it doesn't. And then I have to backpedal or I reduce the price or the guy says, would you take 50? And I go, sure. A lot of head games go into this whole card pricing thing. And I don't really like it because like originally I'd priced my stuff at what I thought was a fair price. And then people would always be like, oh, could you take $8 instead of $10? I'd be like, well, it's like a $14 card. And I thought $10 was fair, right? So it's like people enjoy that a little too much and that's okay. So sometimes you got to kind of like play the game with them. But I think that like if there's the demand for it, why can't I be the guy that says, you know what? It's not a $10 card. I think it's a $15 card. You know, like without getting too specific into prices, Connor Bedard. I was buying and selling and wheeling and dealing with Connor Bedard cards all weekend. And every time I put a few out in the case, they would sell. And I know like one guy said to me, he said, oh, well, that's a $20 card on eBay. And I'd say it might be, but I sold 3 copies of that card for $30. And I wasn't pulling his leg. I was being serious. So if it's $20 on eBay, but I could sell it for $30, why would I match the eBay prices? I wouldn't because I have overhead. And this is an in-demand card. And the guy was like, he was a young man. And then his dad said, that's okay. I'll buy it for you. Because he was buying himself something. And he's like, it's okay. I'll buy it for you. And, you know, the son was like trying to explain to his dad, well, I could get it cheaper on eBay. And he's like, yeah, but you can have this right now. And there's no guarantee that you're going to win that auction. because they weren't buy it nows, they were auctions. And so he's looking at past auctions and saying, well, the past auctions, it went for $23. Why are you charging $30? And the dad's like, because $30, we have it right now.
See, that was a smart dad because he understands how economics work. And when the people that don't understand and think that everything should be sold at that last price, no, because we're not dealing with something that is within that realm of existence. We're not dealing with going to the store and you're buying a box of cereal where every box of cereal on the shelf is the same exact price. This isn't how that works. This is different. And so you got to look at circumstance and you got to look at where you're at. I have no problem with people negotiating price.
Right.
I've done it. I did it over the weekend. I have no problem with that. Where I have the problem is when people make blanket statements like, oh, this show was horrible. Everything was overpriced. That's ridiculous. And that was by far, other than the heat, the second biggest complaint that I saw being tussled about on social media throughout the whole entire week is how overpriced everything was. And all I could think of was, overpriced to who? Obviously, these are the people that sit in front of their computer screens or their phones all the time. And that's all the shopping they do. They don't do it in person. They don't go to a local card shop. They don't go to a show. They're not dealing with like an actual marketplace where real people exchange real goods and services. It's gotten to that point where it's just, the gamblers, the flippers, the opportunists, they did their thing from 2019 to 2022, and they created this whole world. So now they're all mad that they have to live in the same world that they created. And I don't get it. So here's my take on this. So I didn't go to the National last year, but I know what I heard and I know what we talked about. But I did go to the National the year before, and that was still kind of COVID, right? So we had all of that issue going on still, and we were stuck in that. And I remember at the end, because I was there Saturday, and even on Saturday, towards the end of the day, dealers seemed very, very interested in eliminating product and eliminating product quickly. Maybe not as much liquidation, but trying to get rid of stuff. This time around, even on Sunday, late in the day, I think most of the dealers seemed less interested this time around in going after those rock bottom prices just to move things, and more willing to sit on the product that they have and hold firm onto those prices just because they know where the market is going. And you can clearly see, based off of what we witnessed over those 5 days, that the hobby's pretty healthy. Yeah, these big mega super cards that the 1%ers can afford, yeah, those have taken a nosedive. But most of us that sit in that mushy middle, I think it's good. I think we're in a good place.
Oh, I totally agree. I also want to say, I think that, the idea that some people like to haggle just to haggle, I think. And like, I bought 2 cards that I was very happy with. I bought the Crosby and Ovechkin rookies from the Upper Deck Victory set, and they were both priced at $30. That was a great deal. And I said, okay, I'll take them. $60. Boom. And of course, the Ovechkin alone goes for 50 or 60 on eBay, or 70 in some cases. I looked up afterwards. I could have negotiated. I bought 2 cards, but the price was already low. I thought it was fair. And I thought, let me make a deal. And what I approached the National this way: on Thursday, I didn't buy anything. I like nothing. I just walked around and I bought nothing. And Friday, I decided, okay, here's a time to really spend some money. And I did. And there was a little bit of negotiation, but I always negotiate when I know I'm going to buy 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. And then I thought, okay, maybe we can make a deal here. But otherwise, I feel for the dealer in that case, even though I'm not a dealer. And maybe Sal can talk about, people just want to haggle, I think, just for haggle's sake. I feel like people put prices for a reason. Now, that Ovechkin I mentioned, another booth had it for $225. Okay, which is insane.
For the Victory rookie?
Right. And so I saw it for 30 and I bought it, which was super cheap. And then 225 is like not even in the realm of reality. So what I did was, when I saw it at 225, I just walked away. I thought, and they had other hockey in the showcase. And I thought, if this is 225, the rest of this stuff must be ridiculously priced too. So I walked away. And
it wasn't graded?
And it was not graded. Neither.
What?
The ones I bought were not graded either. So when you have 750 booths, you have the choice, you can do that, right? And so the customer will sort of adapt to that. The other thing I want to say is that I think if you're looking for a deal, then there were people setting up on the floor in the lobby, and you can buy from those people on the floor.
Yeah,
Like,
what was up with that?
that was weird. That was a Friday thing mostly. And then trade nights, you can actually trade. Like, I went to a trade night on a Friday. It was mostly soccer, but I had stuff to trade. I don't want to spend money there. I wanted to trade, and I made some trades, and it was cool because trading reminds me of when I was in grade school and high school when you traded for cards. You know, nobody actually spent money. You know, you just traded what you don't want for the stuff I want. And so there's ways to do that without having to either A, haggle, or B, spend ridiculous sums of money. Just get rid of what you don't want and get what you want. And the trade nights, there was a one on Thursday night. There were various ones on Friday night. And, you know, there was a lot of that going on too. And there were people selling, but I will say there were also fewer of those people with the metal cases running around selling to dealers. I saw very few of those people. There were some, but very few compared to.
Oh, I saw lots of metal cases. I mean, it's just, it's.
I think he's talking more at the trade nights. The metal case people were.
Yeah,
there.
they're there at the trade
Oh.
night. On the show, I mean, like trying to sell to dealers aggressively. There was less of that than last year. Last year, that's all I saw in Atlantic City. It was ridiculous, really.
I feel like I saw more, but I was looking. I was actually looking for the people with the cases because I was making a mental note of everybody that had them. And 2 years ago, there were a lot of people that had them, but they were those people where they had all their graded cards and they were all the super duper high end ones.
Yeah, all basketball stuff, all the basketball, football stuff, right?
Yeah, this time it was all those people plus all the kids had them.
Well, the kids
That
had them
blew
because
my mind.
They thought it was cool to have the case, but they weren't flippers. At least I don't think they were.
Little kids coming up to the table with 3 cards in their case and they're worth more than my entire collection in my house.
There
ridiculous.
were a lot of people who tried to sell me cards. Some people I bought cards from, some people I traded cards with. Some people I didn't buy from. I think what's kind of funny is that you have kids with good cards, but they're still kids. So they don't have the negotiation skills and they don't understand how business works. And when I politely explain to them how these things work, I see the disappointment on their face, like slowly, like that realization. Because like I had a kid who wanted to sell me a card. I don't remember what it was. We'll just say it was $200. Let's just say it was a $200 card. And I looked at it. I said, what do you want for this card? And he says, $200. And I said, okay, what do you think I could sell it for? Long pause. And then he says, $200. I said, so I wouldn't be making money off of this. And then the kid said to me, I could go $195. And I said, so I would have to spend $195 to maybe make $5. He goes, well, it's comping at 200. I go, yes. I said, but the next card might only comp at 180 or 190. And then the person who buys it off of me is going to want it for 190 or 180. I said, so I need room to work with. And then I say, generally speaking, I'll pay about 50% or more or less. I mean, it depends. If somebody says, here's a Gretzky rookie and I want $1,000 for it, it's ungraded, and I go, okay, and I buy it, and then maybe I could sell it for $1,200 or $1,300. Tying up $1,000 to make $300, but that makes sense because it's something that's going to sell. A lot of times it's people who have a box of crap cards and they'll be like, I want $600 for this box. And it's like, I look at it and I say, buddy, I'd have to sell every card in this box to make my money back. Well, if you did, you'd make $800. I'd go, yes, but I'd have to sell every card in the box, right? So there's money that you put up and there's time. If somebody says, here's a card that you could sell for $100 and I only want $50 for it, I only want $60 for it, fine, done, right? It was like that last year with Cale Makar. I'd buy a Cale Makar card, I'd sell it an hour later. It was easy breezy. So these kids today, right? Typical old person speak, but I would explain to them, I'd say, look, it cost me money to be here. There's an expense to sell at the show. There's an expense to transport these things here. Or they'd say, like, it's a $20 card. And I'd say, well, I can't give you $15 for it because someone is going to want to pay me $15 for it because it's a $20 card. So I'd explain it to them. And a lot of them would get it. Some of them would even say, okay, I could do this much for the card. And we'd work something out. They're smart kids. They understand. They're learning on the job, basically.
Kids should be forced to watch American Pickers because they would learn. because they go into these places all the time, and you get all these guys that are like professional pickers, and they come in and they're like, oh, here's some signs from the 50s, blah blah blah. What do you want for this one? And the guy will say 1,500, and they'll be like, that's dead on retail.
Right.
Like, we can't pay dead on retail. We got to have something.
Right.
Because if I'm going to sell it for 1,500, I got to get it for something less than that because of all the expenses, and there's got to be some meat on the bone.
Right.
And half the time with those professional guys, they don't do much. And it's usually only the guys that have 2 and 3 of everything, and they'll sell off the one that's not as nice.
Right.
You know, but they could still, you know, make a couple bucks on it. Those are the shows that these kids need to watch so they see how this works. Because, you know, if you're going to pass it down to somebody that's going to sell it again, you're not going to get full amount for it. You want to go trade with your friends and trade dollar for dollar? That's easy to do, but you're not going to get that from a reseller.
One thing I just want to mention really quick, and I hinted at this in the previous podcast, and I'll mention it now because the cat's out of the bag. So I said I was going to have a new T-shirt that I was going to unveil at the National, and I did, and it was a pretty good seller. I call it the Wrath of Comps. It's Captain Kirk from when he was yelling "Con" from Star Trek II, but he's yelling "Comps" and he's holding an iPhone. And people saw that and they cracked up and they're like, oh my God, that is perfect, right? So I'm going to put a link to where you can buy that. It'll be on the online shop. So there'll be a link below, the Wrath of Comps, available in sizes medium through 4XL. I was wearing that a couple days at the show and people saw that and they cracked up and they're like, dude, that is a funny shirt. I'm like, I got them at my booth. Come buy one, you know, and some did. So that was good. And then I gave away my set of Puck Junk Bad Hockey Card Hall of Fame trading cards. I still got a bunch left, so if you want a set, just reach out to me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or you can even email me, and I will send you a set for free. I don't even want postage or nothing. I just want to get it into your hands, so just want to throw those out there.
So speaking of kids, since we were talking about the subject of kids, I will say this. There were so many kids at this show. You know, being there Saturday and Sunday, I have never seen that many kids that appeared to be under the age of 18 at a national since probably my first one back in '93. There was tons, and the amount of families where it was like husband, wife, and 2.3 kids. It was crazy. I saw people on Sunday pushing baby strollers and stuff. I was like, what? What is going on here? Normally, when I refer to the proverbial kids, I'm talking anybody under the age of 35. I'm actually talking real kids here. You know, there were tons of families, multiple kids. There were gaggles of like teenagers walking around in groups. And I don't know if they were like moving in packs like wolves to try to like do something nefarious, but most of them were going from table to table looking, you know, to make deals and buy or trade and all of that kind of stuff. And I guess it's not a surprise now that we know that attendance records were broken to see that there was that many younger people interested and actively engaged. But I think that was very promising, at least for me. I said it a minute ago, I think the hobby's strong, and that's something that leads me to believe that, especially if these are kids that are going to stick around.
Yeah, no, I agree with that thought, and it was nice to see. And maybe because the prices have come down a little bit, you know, I still think wax is very expensive for kids. I can't imagine kids are buying packs and opening them. Or maybe they are. Maybe their parents are. Maybe it's a gift, or maybe they're buying single cards. I don't really know what they're doing. I mean, not all those kids had the silver cases. I mean, some of those did, but a lot of them were just happy to get a free pack of cards or to, you know, they're buying. You know, we should say too, there was a lot of Pokemon and other stuff like that too at this show.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of those kids are into that. I know my son is. There's definitely interest there, and we'll see how long it lasts. You know, we know that kids increasingly watch sports less, right? So that's one thing. We know that the hobby really is for a lot of people that are really in our age range because we have that nostalgia from our childhood. So I don't know how long it'll carry over, but it's good to see families, and I can't tell. You know, I can't tell if it was dads dragging their kids. In a lot of cases, I did notice a lot of kids that were dragging their parents.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and one thing on that, kids consume sports differently. I don't think it's so much that they don't watch it anymore. They don't consume it.
They're watching Instagram videos and
they're watching the highlights. They're watching recaps. They're watching. So yeah, you can have a discussion with them about it, but you aren't going to be able to discuss like the intricacies of the various plays that took place in the middle of the innings on the baseball game or certain plays on third down on a football game. Yeah, because they missed all that. They didn't see those things.
Right.
They saw the goals, they saw the big hits, they saw the touchdowns, they saw all of that kind of stuff. So they're consuming differently. That's my only concern about having that kind of background pushed into the hobby, because in order for the collecting to be sustainable, and I know it evolves, I get it, but like a sustainable collecting type environment needs to get away from that fantasy football style of collecting. You know what I mean? Where you're just targeting, and a lot of that is prospecting also, where you're just trying to find the next big thing and you're targeting that and going after it. And then all of a sudden it doesn't pan out. So you're immediately 100% out and you're off to something else. And I was kind of happy because I would go to tables where there were kids thumbing through boxes. And a few times on times on Sunday, I saw some kids looking at some stuff, and I struck up a conversation. Like, "Oh, are you looking for anybody in particular? Because I'm looking for in a box too. And if I see it, I'll, oh, you looking for this one?" And I'll hand it to them. And kids were like, "Yeah, I PC this guy," and it's like somebody I've never heard of. I'm like, "Oh, really? Why?" And, "Oh, he's from my hometown." See, now that's awesome. That's what I like to hear. Because there's a reason behind it. There's a story behind it. It's got some type of nostalgic
connection. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Rather than just, oh, who's the next Yankees prospect that's overpaid $180 billion that's still not in the MLB and his cards are worth $30,000.
Well, I think a lot of the kids picked it up from their parents or their fathers, but maybe both parents when they got back into collecting in 2020, because everybody was home. People rediscovered their card collections. It was something to do, something to pass the time. And I almost think it's kind of like, I'll give you kind of like an example that this kind of reminds me of, and we're all of this age. Now, Tim, I know you're a musician, so you're going to have a skewed opinion anyways, but I think about like when CDs replaced records and records became the thing of garage sales, and they were thrown into the basement, put into crates or boxes, not looked at, sold at garage sales for $0.25 or whatever. I mean, there were still people who bought records in the 90s, but it was harder because CDs were everywhere. Cassettes were still around. Records were really not around because the stores didn't want to make room for them. But then there became this whole movement of records and vinyl. I have students in their 20s who love vinyl, and they wax poetic about how great vinyl is. And I think about how much I didn't like vinyl. It was big. It was hard to take with you. It was a pain in the ass to get the needle on the record while it was spinning. I probably scratched a few records that way. It'd always make that pop sound and you jump. To me, there was nothing great about records. To me, it was CDs, because that was high tech and it made a rainbow when you shine a light on it, right? And then it'd come with a little book, right? The record would come with the sleeve, and yes, you'd have bigger artwork. The point I'm making, though, was that you have this younger generation now who embraces vinyl, and they even have embraced the cassette tape, and they say, there's something really cool about this linear experience where you listen to an album and you don't just jump around to your favorite songs. You listen to the whole tape, right? Side A, side B, and it becomes this experience. Whereas, I mean, really, these kids have grown up with MP3s or whatever digital audio format, so they could kind of look back and see this different format and say, this is really cool. And I think maybe they're kind of drawn to trading cards in that same regard, where it's a snapshot. They're so used to videos on YouTube, or they could play a video game and they could put themselves in the game and skate on a line with their favorite players. And a card is this tangible thing that they can hold, they can look at, and it has a limited amount of data on the back. It's a snapshot, right? This is a 1968 Gordie Howe card. It actually came out in 1968. I'll give you one quick example. I was selling at a Transformers toy convention, and this young man wanted to buy an original Optimus Prime from me. He wasn't like, oh, I want to reissue Optimus Prime. That's going to be a nicer shape. To him, a 1984 Optimus Prime was like what a Mickey Mantle baseball card would mean to maybe a young fan who's a Yankees fan, right? Before my time, but this is somebody that is part of the game, part of the history. I look up to him, or my parents look up to him. So we're kind of getting that in like other collecting avenues, and maybe that's why cards have become a popular thing, whereas maybe the people 10 years or 20 years younger than us were just like, whatever, I got video games, that's better. But now the people 30 years, 40 years younger than us are like, wow, this is so unique.
It's new to them, but also I think maybe a lot of parents are trying to get their kids off of devices. And the kids I did see at the show, they weren't holding any phones in their hands. They were really engulfed with the show. They were looking through boxes, they were talking to adults, they were hanging out with their parents, and that was nice. And so maybe that part of that is part of that experience. In the piece I wrote for Puck Junk, I liken the National to a sporting event in that there was this bonding going on, and also there were athletes signing there, and a lot of kids were getting pictures taken with athletes that clearly they never saw play because they weren't even born yet when these guys were playing. So I think there was this multi-generational thing, which is really nice. And it's like when your dad took you to a baseball game, or your grandfather took you to a baseball game, and that's going on today still. And I think the cards, the autographs, the memorabilia is that connection. Also, we should mention that the National in a lot of ways is like a museum. You can see stuff there that you can never own, obviously. I know that right behind Sal's booth, there was, Babe Ruth's bat. Where are you going to see Babe Ruth's bat? Nowhere, unless you go to Cooperstown. And so stuff like that is really cool. And so I think that a lot of kids want to see that. Even my kids have heard of Babe Ruth. He's an American legend. He's a historical figure. And so the National does that, makes that connection happen too. And we should point that out. I think is really important.
That's something that I've always brought up too, is that's exactly what the National is. It's a sports memorabilia museum. Even if you're not there to buy, you can see everything you pretty much would expect to see in a museum of whatever sport you're going to. It just so happens that going to the National, you could potentially own some of it because most of it's for sale. If you were going to build like a sports card museum or a sports memorabilia museum, I would say the vast majority of examples of things that you'd want to put in it, you will find on that show floor. And over the years, I've seen examples of most of the major things that have been discussed over the years as being key pieces of memorabilia. You mentioned Babe Ruth's bat, or was it last 2 years ago? I think it was Memory Lane had a full uniform from Lou Gehrig. All of it. There's countless numbers of trophies and rings and jerseys and equipment and just everything. There's no shortage of any of it.
We should point out too, Tim, that we saw all the Hockey Hall of Fame stuff. They brought in some of the trophies on Sunday.
It's crazy.
Hart Trophy, among others.
Hey, there's this whole other room you didn't go to. What? Well, now I have to come back tomorrow, and I come back tomorrow, and we go over to that room, and the Hockey Hall of Fame is there with all the trophies, minus the Stanley Cup, just sitting there. What did I say I was going to do? I was going to grab the Hart Trophy, and I was going to pick it up and hold it over my head. I looked around like 3 times for security. I didn't see anybody.
Right. It was. And
then
surreal.
I got scared, and I didn't do it. But I did get a picture.
Right. I think at the Hockey Hall of Fame is probably behind glass. We touched it. It was really cool. So
yeah, it was awesome.
So there were a couple of hockey signers, and actually this one just totally flew right by me. I didn't even know that he was signing. But Chance, the mascot from the Vegas Golden Knights, was signing an oversized 5x7 card. And, if Chance really cared, he would have made that his day with the cup. He would have brought the cup to the National Sports Convention as his day with the cup. And then you would have been able to see the Stanley Cup and also get Chance's autograph. Actually, I didn't even see that advertised on Upper Deck's website. So Upper Deck had a couple of autograph signings at their booth. Like I said, they had Chance, the Vegas Golden Knights mascot. They had wrestler Sky Blue. I don't know much about wrestling. I guess she's AEW. They
That's who they have their license with.
They have the license with them, yeah.
And then they had Joseph Woll, the goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he was also signing a 5x7 oversized card at the show, which, I mean, of course, he was super nice. Now, Tim, when you said you went there was a line. I'll just tell you about my experience. I went more towards the end. A couple of nice ladies from Montreal purchased some cards from me, and they said, oh, if you want to get Joseph Woll's autograph, he's signing at the Upper Deck EPAC booth. I go, the EPAC booth? They're like, yeah, not this one, the one in the other room. I said, okay, well, I better go because it's already like 12 o'clock, and he was signing for like an hour. So I hightail it over there. There's about 15 people in line. I get to the front of the line. One of the Upper Deck guys that I know is like, hey, Sal, what's up? Here, give me your phone. I'll take a picture. Okay, cool. So I get my photo taken with Woll. He signs his card, his giant card. And as he's handing it to me, I'm like, do you want a T-shirt? He's like, yeah, that'd be cool. I'm like, I'll trade you this Puck Junk shirt for that autograph. And then a couple people around like were chuckling about that. But nice young man, promising goaltender for the Leafs. He was part of the World Junior Championship United States team that won gold, I think, about 5 years ago. But I was really scratching my head. Like, of all the players, it's like, who's the goalie on the Maple Leafs? Who's the third string goalie on the Maple Leafs? Yeah, let's bring him to Chicago, right? And it's not disrespectful to him. It's just like, it seemed like a very unusual thing because they could have brought Alex Stalock. Perfect example. Stalock had a hell of a season with the Blackhawks. I mean, he was pretty much like the number 2 goalie, and every time they put him in, he played lights out. In fact, I think they kind of benched him at the end because they're like, we want to get that first overall pick, and if we keep playing Alex Stalock, we're not going to win, and by win, I mean lose. And I'm actually surprised he wasn't traded away because his trade value as a backup would have been worth a lot more. But that's just an example. Or like Connor Murphy or Seth Jones or Andreas Anthony, like a Blackhawk who had a decent season would have made more sense, but it doesn't matter. It was still cool.
I mean, he's an American-born player, and he's from Missouri. That's the only connection I can think of.
Right, and Missouri's close enough.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, I wondered the same thing, and I thought, Upper Deck has other players under contract, and I mentioned at the show to you guys, I'm like, they could have brought in like a Lafreniere. I know he's a New York guy, but try to bring in a bigger name, especially to make up for the fact that TriStar didn't really have any big hockey signers other than Yager, who's charging a lot of money, and he signs at the Expo now in Toronto, and he did the National last year, I think, or no, 2 years ago. I mean, he's been. It was
last year.
He's signing more and more Yager, and so. But it'd be nice to have. I mean, when you look at the offerings for basketball, baseball, football, and then you look at hockey, it's like it's Chicago. It's a huge market. There was nothing, and it was really, and like Upper Deck could make up for that, but really TriStar should. And if they brought Yager back, it makes me think that enough people were interested in him and in hockey that they could have tried to bring in some Blackhawk legends. I mean, you see better hockey signers at the Spectacular than you did at the National. And I'm hoping with new blood now running it, the guys who run the New York shows, I hope that they bring in some more hockey, not just legends, but even maybe current players. I mean, it's ideal given it's the off season. You could bring in current players, which is always ideal signers as opposed to guys who played 30 years ago. That's the one thing I think for hockey collectors that's really missing at the National is good signers.
Yeah,
well, that's something that I brought up maybe a show or so ago after Fanatics announced they were going to do those live events. Fanatics is basically ready to come in and just destroy everything, I hope they don't, but they're a juggernaut, and they showed it at the show. The Fanatics live booth and that whole area was a crazy, insane place that I wanted to stay away from every second. Because every time I'd walk anywhere near there, I thought I was going to get hit with something, or there was just a riot going on. I mean, it was crazy.
All I kept thinking, though, was the Fanatics people were looking at this show and thinking, wait a minute, like if this is so popular and this is so big, we got to get a piece of this. And I envision Fanatics doing more like a Comic-Con type of traveling show.
Well, and that's exactly what they've talked about doing, is modeling it more after a Comic-Con type thing. But think about this for a second. Fanatics is the official sponsor of pretty much all the major sports when it comes to apparel and licensing, other than trading card license for the NHL. The rest of it they have. They have the NHL license. They have the NHLPA agreement set up where they can make jerseys of players and all of that kind of stuff. They have all of that already. They also have the wing that is, who's the company that runs not the industry summit, but the Mint Collective.
They're going to take that over, right?
Well, yeah, they're taking it over. Well, they're combining with that other company,
right,
to sponsor all of those things. And that's the company that has all of these licensing agreements for appearances with all these entertainers and athletes and everything else. So going forward, Fanatics starts to do a couple of these bigger some of these bigger shows on, and we start to see that their autograph signer list is way more robust than what TriStar is getting, because again, Fanatics is this big, TriStar's this big. So if Fanatics is going to throw a bunch of money to get people to come over to them, what's going to stop them?
Well, who's to say that in the future Fanatics doesn't sponsor the autograph pavilion, right?
That's exactly it. We don't know yet, but there's all of those things are going through my head thinking, yeah, the last few shows, TriStar, at least from a hockey standpoint, they've been starting to get kind of stale, and it's been the same people, and hockey, we don't have any representation, and it's like, okay, somebody else needs a shot at this.
Last year, I think, just off the top of my head, the hockey autograph signers at the National were Bobby Hull, Brian Leach, Bernie Parent, Jaromir Jagr, and maybe one other that I'm forgetting.
Was it Chelios?
No, it wasn't Chelios. Chelios was way back in 2019.
Oh.
So as far as 2022, I think there were only like 4 or 5. And I know that because I was trying to keep cards of those guys handy. Maybe Ray Bork. I don't quite remember, though. I want to say maybe Ray Bork, maybe not. But, there was only like 5. And I think about like how many Rangers, Flyers, Devils, Penguins fans that I interacted with at the show.
You're talking the AC show, right?
Yeah, the AC show. 2 years ago, I want to say it was just Brett Hull, Bobby Hull, and one other, if I remember correct. Maybe it was Chelios in 2021. I think we mentioned how it was all pretty much just pretty local. It was like Hull, Chelios, and Brett Hull. So yeah, there's really been kind of a dearth of hockey autograph signers. I mean, the only other hockey autograph signer was Murray Bannerman, and God love him, but he's done a lot of the Blackhawks conventions. He retired in 87, 88. So, I mean, he's from a long time ago. He did play in a couple of All-Star games. He did have arguably the second best goalie mask in Blackhawks history after Ed Belfour's Eagle mask. Some might say that Murray Bannerman's Kabuki style mask is a cooler mask. That doesn't matter, though. I mean, the thing is like, he's not the kind of player that somebody will say, oh, yeah, I remember him. I'll get his autograph. I'll give you like another, for instance, like who's like a player that we might get an autograph? Like, say, like John Davidson. Okay, we love John Davidson because of his color commentary. But he was also like a solid goaltender in like the 70s and 80s. So if like JD was signing autographs in Chicago, I could see people in Chicago saying, oh, I want his autograph. And people from the East Coast saying, I want his autograph too. Or even like, say, Darren Pang. There's another perfect example. Darren Pang is working for the Blackhawks again. He played 2 seasons in the NHL, but he is one of the best color commentators in the sport of hockey. So people love Darren Pang because he's color guy or ringside reporter for the Blues and for the Coyotes. And I mean, in the past for the Blackhawks, of course, for a little bit before he moved on. So he's moved around and like people know who he is, from the, wasn't he on the TNT broadcasts?
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing is like, it wouldn't have been that hard. They could have gotten like an Andrew Shaw or Patrick Sharp or, maybe Duncan Keith, who just retired not too long ago. I mean, there are people outside of Chicago who'd be like, oh yeah, Duncan Keith, great player. I'd like his autograph. It'd be a Chicago-centric player that would have appeal to people outside of Chicago, to hockey fans.
Yeah,
and that's why I question whether they can get these people.
Well, right, because I know, for example, like Lundqvist is under contract with Fanatics, so he'll do a show in New York, and then they'll have the Fanatics tablecloth, and he'll charge $100 for flats or whatever. But he's never going to do TriStar, right? Never. And so we'll never see him at a national. And so I wonder, even next year in Cleveland, like what kind of hockey signers will you get in Cleveland? Maybe none. I mean, it'll be, it's not even really married to a market there.
They'll bring in Gilles Malache, former Cleveland Baron.
Yeah, okay, but 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 you know what I mean. Like, I think the time is ripe to bring in some of these guys who work as broadcasters too, because people see them on TV, and maybe there's a chance to, like a Mark Messier. That guy should be signing. He should be signing, but he doesn't. Not really. And he was promoting a book a year ago, and he still wasn't doing that much.
Yeah, I haven't seen Messier at a show regularly in years.
Right.
Many years.
Right. And so, that connection to that period of the 80s and 90s that we're very much married to, you don't see those guys signing, like a Gretzky, a Lemieux. These guys, they don't sign. They're not going to do that. I mean, the list was really sad, I thought. And that was the one thing for hockey offering that was really, really bad. But, for example, they were bringing all these big basketball players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was charging, I think, $750 for flats. And then they were...
Did you see how long he signed?
Yeah, he signed.
He was there for like 18 hours or something.
Yeah, well, he was there until 7 p.m. on Friday, because in addition to the fact that he was signing, if you're getting his rookie card signed, they were also grading it on the spot, just eyeballing it, and then upcharging you like another $1,000. Let's say.
I heard it was his wife was the
all
decision maker.
It was some representative, but I don't know if it was his wife. But what happened was every signing, every person was a 20-minute negotiation. And some people were saying stuff like, look, I just bought the card out there. It's a 4. I just cracked it. I can show you the case. It's not a 7, or an 8. It's a 4. I just cracked it just to get it signed. And this became a negotiation. And I kind of witnessed part of it because I had the media badge, and I went over there, and I kind of wanted to see what was the holdup, because there was a guy next to me on Friday. He was number 11, right? Number 11. It took him 2.5 hours just to get online. Because all the VIPs went first, and then it was like, what's going on up there? And so I hope that doesn't become the new norm with these big stars, because look, if you're going to have PSA grading it on the spot, wonderful. But if it's going to be just like his wife or some agent, that's not going to fly. And I don't care if it's Kareem or Gretzky or whoever, people ultimately will sour on that. The lines said otherwise. He was there for 2 days. Lots of people were in line for him and spent lots of money. So
I did notice he was signing his full name too.
Oh, no. Well, you had to pay extra for Kareem. Otherwise, you just got Abdul-Jabbar.
Oh, you did? Because, he usually only signs Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah, I think you had to pay extra for Kareem. So
I saw a bunch of people with Kareem, and I was like, wow, he's actually signing his full name finally.
No, they paid for that.
Of course they did.
You've made it when you can upcharge for your full name, not just your last name, but your full name.
That's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to charge for my autograph, and I'm going to say, if you want me to dot the I, it's an extra $50. If you want me to dot both I's, it's an extra $90.
Okay.
So I'll give a discount.
A little bit of a discount. This whole rookie card upcharge thing has become a very disturbing trend, because
what happened to the whole, if you sign a rookie card, it's worth less?
Which is what we grew up with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't care.
We always thought growing up.
When I got stuff signed, I got Dominic Hasek's 90-91 IHL Indianapolis Ice card autographed by him. And I'm damn happy I did it. And I don't care what it's worth, because it's worth more to me with that autograph. And I actually was probably the only kid at that event who had a Dominic Hasek card back then, because I was that type of kid. But what I'm saying is, one thing that bothers me is the athletes charged, flat up to 16 by 20, right? The reason why I don't pay for most autographs or don't buy autographs is because I'm annoyed that it's going to be a little autograph on a card. It's like, Well, if you're going to charge me, let's say 11 by 14, but you go, oh, that's a 16 by 20, I'm going to charge you more for an autograph on that. Well, how about charging me less for something smaller? Some players have started doing that. For example, Raleigh Fingers, former Major League Baseball pitcher, I want to say his fee for signing a baseball card was like $30 or $35. So it made sense. Like if you say, oh, okay, well, it's $50 if I get a photo signed, but only $35 if I get a card signed. And I really want to get his 85 Topps card signed because he has a cool curly mustache on that card, right? And so I'd like to see more of that where they give you a special on cards. But there were some players that had the caveat like Mr. So-and-so will not sign more than 5 cards per person. So if you came up and bought 5 autograph tickets and said, I want these 5 cards signed, they'd limit you to 4 or whatever. But if it's a smaller autograph on a smaller thing, why not charge less? No, most of them charge the same. And now it's like, but if it's that specific card, we're going to charge you more because you have a stronger sentimental attachment to it.
It's not just that, Sal. I think they want to try to make money on a secondary market. They want to try to say, okay, you know what? If you resell that card, it's not worth it now because we charge you so much money to sign a rookie card that it's just not worth it.
That's absolutely right. And another thing that the promoters do is after the player is done signing for the fans who purchased a ticket, they have them sign stuff because they pay them for a couple hours of their time. So if they have leftover time, I sat there and I talked with the player. Actually, I stood there and I talked with the player. And when he was done signing for people, they just started shoving 8x10s under his nose. They even put like a little frame, like where they wanted him to sign within this area, kind of like lining up the sweet spot of the photo. And then they'd line up all these pucks. I've gone behind the curtain before. The curtain, behind where the autograph guys sit. And you go there and it's just tables and tables full of football helmets and basketballs and hockey pucks and hockey sticks and photos. It's crazy. And so
that's why it shows up in your email a month later that they have like, hey, get these autographs. They're for sale for Father's Day. And you're like, wait, didn't the guy sign? Because you're right. He signed all this extra stuff as part of their time. Right.
So let's say you pay $50 to get a puck signed. All right. You pay $50 to get a puck signed. Then what they do is they get a bunch of pucks signed and then they'll sell them for $25, $30. And you go, wait a minute. I paid $50 to stand in line and get this puck signed, but now I could have bought one for $25. What the hell, right? And they do that. They undercut it because if you think you're going to turn around and sell that puck, well, guess what, buddy? They're going to sell that puck too, and they're going to sell it for less than what you paid for it. I found this out from a dealer who told me how these things work. But then, like I said, once I went behind the magic curtain and I saw for myself, and I saw like the players, like after they did their signing, they'd go sit at a table and they would just sign a bunch of stuff until their time was up. It's crazy.
Part of it too, I was talking about that with people online, and we were saying, hey, look, if you go back 2 tables from the pavilion, you can probably buy that autograph for half the price. But I think a lot of people are willing to say, you know what, I'm paying $100 or $200, but I'm going to meet the guy even for 30 seconds. I'll shake his hand. I'll tell him, you're my favorite quarterback or whatever.
Right.
And that means something to those people. And you're paying for the interaction. So when people say to me, oh, I met blah, 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 and he was so nice to me, I'm like, well, you paid him. Like, I hope he was nice to you.
He wasn't doing it out of the kindness of his heart.
I hope he was nice. And some people were not so nice. There were some signers at the National, I'm not going to name them. They weren't even looking up at people. They weren't even saying hi. So I think those people kind of felt like, oh, wow, like I'm paying you to sign my baseball and you're not even really going to make small talk.
Right.
So that's part of it.
One thing I want to just throw out really quick, just want to backtrack on something. So this was the biggest national show as far as like square footage. And it should be interesting to see what they do in 2024 in Cleveland. I'll tell you why I like the fact that it was a bigger show. Not just because it gave Tim an excuse to come back for a second day, because there was a whole other half of the show or third of the show that he didn't see the first time. But the thing is that when you have more people, you have to give them more stuff to do and you have to give them more room to do it in. And I'm going to just give a quick example. The Chicago Blackhawks convention. The first year they had a Blackhawk convention, there were 5,000 people. And there was enough room to move around and everybody was able to do everything and it was cool, right? The second year, they sold 7,500 tickets and it got a little crowded. The third year, they upped it to 10,000 tickets. So basically, in a 3-year span, they doubled how many people were allowed to come to the convention. The problem was that they didn't increase anything else. It was still the same 4 rooms in the basement of the hotel that they were holding it at. One room was just for you to go get your passes, right? So once you were done in that room, you had no reason to go back in there. One room was full of interactive games like a slap shot, radar gun thing and stuff like that. Nothing you could do to kill an hour. One room was where they had all the autograph stages, where you wait in line. And one room was the dealer room, which wasn't actually that much to buy because certain years they had like less dealers or they didn't really have that much variety. And a lot of times it was like 4 Seasons Heating and Cooling, proud sponsor of the Chicago Blackhawks. And then there's the U.S. Marines recruitment table. And then there's the Chicago Shamrocks lacrosse team who has an information booth. Some of the things they had just weren't like the kind of things that you could kill an hour. It wasn't like going to a card show where you'd be like, oh, cool, there's a whole room of memorabilia. You'd
Sounds
have
more like going to a Chamber of Commerce show.
It felt like that. So you'd have 10,000 people.
Go get the gutter guard.
I'm sure they were there too one year, leaf guard or gutter guard.
Yep.
But I remember there would be people with nothing to do and they'd be all hanging out upstairs, like in the hotel lobby. And then you'd have people lining up to line up. They'd be like, oh, I'm here for the 5 o'clock thing. And it's like 3 o'clock. So they'd be lining up, but the line wouldn't officially start until 5. So you had people waiting to wait. Oh, I really want to see this Second City improvisational comedy show about hockey. And that starts at 8 o'clock, but I'm going to get in line at 6 because by 7, the room's going to be full and it doesn't even start until 8. So when you have that many people, you got to give them stuff to do and you got to give them space to do it in. And so I thought the National did that very well, where it was a crowded show, but it never felt like wall-to-wall people. You know what I'm talking about? At least like when I walked around, I never really felt like I was fighting my way through like a mosh pit like I have at like other Nationals in the past.
Like I said, the Fanatics area and the Tops area, those are a madhouse.
Okay. Well, see, I didn't get to go too far from my booth.
The further away you get from the nucleus of the main floor,
right?
Yep.
The more dispersed people were.
Right.
So like the dealers that are around the edge, there were less people than, think of it like concentric circles. The outer one was less populated. Then the next one was a little more people, then so on and so forth, until you got into the square dead middle. Now that back room across the hall, even on Sunday, there were a ton of people over there.
I agree. There was more space in the aisles compared to Atlantic City. The only problem was the floor plan wasn't necessarily a rectangle. It was this weird, like, it's a rectangle, and then all of a sudden there was like this weird, like, hill. You had to like go into this other area, and so it took a while to figure out, especially when you made that turn and you went to the other areas. I remember the first 2 days I couldn't figure out if the autograph pavilion was like to my right or to my left because it was really confusing. And then I would just go through the lobby and go out the other way. I'm like, it's easier to do that, to leave the show and re-enter it, because it was shorter than to go all the way around. I mean, by day 4, you get an idea for the floor plan, but it wasn't a square or a rectangle, and that is easier when it's a grid compared to when it's not. But if you're gonna do the National in one day, it's almost impossible. This would have been totally impossible to do it even in 2. I'm convinced in 4 out of 5 days I was there, I'm sure I missed a bunch of dealers on the edges, like Tim was saying. I use the edges basically to get through because there was very few people traffic. So I was like, I can cut through here. It was like the HOV lane or something. Like just cut through to get to the middle, for example, on Friday, which was very busy. But
especially the hot areas. How many people just didn't go in them because they were too hot?
It was like the rings of Dante's Inferno in some way.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. That brings me to another thing too. That really hot area in the back was right next to the Breaker Pavilion.
Yeah. It was.
So
you must suffer for your art.
No, look. Breakers are still popular. I mean, they just are.
They are. You can tell by the crowds. Yeah.
Walking through there multiple times, here's the thing. Fanatics Live, right? So that was the big thing going on the show floor.
And the
It's
main
Fanatics
stage was
Live.
there. The main stage was there too.
And they're broadcasting and they're going to do box breaks and they're going to do all that stuff and they're controlling the narrative and only the approved people can break and all of this kind of stuff. So obviously, despite breaking being super popular, it's about to be overhauled. It really is. Because I think the whole Don West, P.T. Barnum, Crazy Eddie's, Carnival Barker attitude of these is running its course. People are sick of it, I think. And it's going to have to change because I will tell you, 2 years ago when they had the Breaker Pavilion, it was nutso back there. People yelling and screaming, all kinds of stuff. I walked through the Breaker Pavilion multiple times Saturday and Sunday. It wasn't loud at all.
No, they weren't.
Like,
They weren't yelling and screaming. They were
yeah.
not doing that. No,
None of that was going on. So I feel
No,
like
that's true.
even though it's still popular, I think we're in the middle of
Subdued.
shift.
It was subdued.
Yeah.
The thing that was really annoying from that area was that they were breaking, and then they were literally taking all the base cards and then throwing them out.
Yep. I
Or they were
saw
putting
that
them on,
too.
or they were putting them on tables, and people
Yep.
were
Just
grabbing
leaving them.
stuff.
Yep.
People were just grabbing. People were like, "Wait, you're gonna throw this out?" It's like, "Yeah, well, we were
Yeah,
all
we don't do anything with them.
we're looking for 3 autographs and 7 inserts. Everything else is garbage." That was almost like you said, in terms of the Dante rings, and it's true in that way. It felt like, and it was a shame because they interspersed dealers with those that in that pavilion, and some dealers there were good, but because they were commingled, mixed around with the breakers, I thought I was there the least amount of time over the 4 days for that reason.
Where
Yeah,
I
so
went back
fair.
there was first thing in the morning
When it was
on
empty still.
Sunday,
Right,
when it was
empty.
still fairly empty
Yep.
and not 100,000 degrees.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yep.
then I was able to go back there and actually walk around and enjoy myself for a few minutes.
Let's talk about some of the stuff that we bought. Clemente, you mentioned you bought some soccer and you bought an Ovechkin and Crosby rookie cards. Did you buy
Yeah.
anything else?
Well, so you talked about autographs, and so I was kind of hungry for hockey autographs, and this one guy had basically like dollar boxes of all these autographs. A lot of them were really awful. Tim saw them, but I
They
got
were
a
awful.
but I got a Mike Vernon Pro Set 1990-91 autograph, really nicely done for $1. I thought it was like, hey, this is the deal of the National, and I like getting cards signed TTM often. And some guys, my only regret is I did not buy this card. He had in a binder several Yari Curry autographed cards for $15, and Yari Curry doesn't really sign. And I know that in the past, when he did sign, he often would purposely smudge the autograph in the mail or whatever he used to do. So he's not a sign. He's in Finland now, and he doesn't do it in the mail. I've sent to him, and so for $15, I probably should have pulled the trigger on one of those cards. Now that we don't know if they're authenticated or not, there's no sticker or anything, so you buy them at your own risk in that way.
Right.
But there were a lot of cards in there that had to be real, because who's gonna go and like fake a Phil Bourque autograph? I mean, nobody. Why would you do that?
Why would you do that, Tim? Why would you fake Phil Bourque's autograph, Tim?
Right.
I wouldn't, because the old 2-9er signs. So
Yeah,
right, he does sign.
I remember seeing Phil Bourque at a Chicago Wolves preseason game, and he was going to make the team. So he's sitting up in the stands with the fans, and he was wearing like a double-breasted suit jacket, looked very sharp, and like people were going up and getting his autograph. I got a bunch of cards signed from him that day. This had to be like 96 or whatever. So yeah, no one's going to forge his autograph because they don't have to.
yeah, and he's also very fan friendly. He's a great guy.
Yeah, no. So there were little pockets like that where I was looking to pick up sort of like these cheapy cards, nothing high priced, and there was a lot of that, and that was refreshing to see at the National, like dollar hockey boxes or quarter hockey boxes that you don't normally see. You see them at the Expo, obviously, but you don't see those at the National. I mean, if you're in for baseball, then you have overabundance of choices, but when you're doing hockey or soccer or some other stuff, it's a much smaller subset, and unfortunately, it's all spread out. So you have to really go all over the place to look for hockey, as opposed to like, hey, let's put all the hockey guys in this one corner. That might be nice. But
no, it wouldn't. I'd hate that.
No,
I'd get very territorial.
Yeah, we have competition. You had a great location. You would walk in the main entrance, make a turn, and your booth was like right there. And I think a lot of hockey people were coming to you, because they saw there was hockey there, and that was cool. I don't think there was any other hockey dealers that were that sort of out there. Some people had multi-sport. They had baseball, basketball, football, hockey. So they had hockey as one showcase. as opposed to just being exclusive hockey. In that case, I think you had cornered the market. But other than that, I didn't pick up any other stuff, but I did spend a lot of time on hockey and soccer. And for the first time, I didn't really buy any baseball, frankly, because the stuff I was interested in baseball-wise was just too expensive. It was just too pricey. The modern stuff was pricey. And the vintage stuff was pricey because now everyone's figured out in baseball, hey, you should buy vintage because it turns out that Roger Maris can't get arrested for DWI or something. So
Right.
So they people are gravitating towards that stuff. I liked Ohtani. I like his stuff. I like him as a player, but I couldn't even touch his stuff because it was so ridiculously priced. And it was all graded, of course, because maximize value.
And go figure, all the big influencers have suddenly changed their tune about ultra modern, and they're all talking about going after vintage now.
Right. Because of what happened to John Morant and to Tease and all these guys, whether they've been injured or arrested or whatever, they realized, wow, was it really worth paying $30K for a John Morant card? The guy's like 2 years in the league, he hasn't won anything yet, and blah, blah, blah. And so,
every big show I've ever been to, vintage is front and center. It's always right in the front because the guys that have the prime locations, they're the ones that sell vintage because they've been doing it for years and years and years. So you see it first, and then once you get past that, you get into the mix of everything. But there was so much vintage. I mean, it was deep. Like we talk about the concentric rings.
Oh, yeah.
Vintage was at least 5 rings in.
Tim, you should talk about, you had some vintage hockey pickups.
I did.
I was there for that.
So. I had a couple. Yeah, so one of the tables in the back part of Dante's Inferno, early on.
The outer ring.
Yeah, the outer ring. Early on Sunday, I happened to be walking around the edge, and out of the corner of my eye, I see two cases, 2 glass cases of older vintage hockey, and kind of looked through there. A lot of it was graded, but there were stacks of individual cards, and I had them come over and got to look through them and see what was in there, and there were quite a few really nice looking pieces at pretty decent prices. So one of my goals was to pick up some vintage hockey while I was there, and I was able to get a 63 Parkhurst Gordie Howe that's in nice shape, as well as a couple other from that set. I got King Clancy and Bill Gadsby from that set. So all Hall of Famers. And then I was also able to get a 60-61 Parkhurst Marcel Pronovo and a 59-60 Parkhurst Dickie Moore. And what was the other? Oh, it was a Harry Howe. It was a Topps. What year was that? This is the sideways one with the yellow box, red box, blue box, white
60-61.
60. Okay. So yeah, so I was able to get the whole kit and caboodle for pretty cheap, the whole pile, and they're all in pretty decent shape. I mean, I'm not going to send these off for grading or anything, but still, it was pretty cool to seek out vintage and actually be able to buy something, A, not slabbed, and B, in nice shape, because you don't see that very often.
I bought a couple boxes of extended series. I wanted to get the redemption packs from Upper Deck. And I was kind of grumbling about the fact that back in the day, and this could have even been 4 or 5 years ago, it'd be like, buy 4 packs or 6 packs, open them at our booth, and get a redemption pack. Now it's buy a full box to get 1 redemption pack. I remember one year it was like, if you buy 4 packs of SP Authentic and open them at the Upper Deck booth, they'd give you a redemption pack, and they'd limit you to 5 packs a day. So basically, if you bought a whole box of SP Authentic, opened it at their booth, they would, or I think maybe they would just slash the cellophane on it, then you would get like 5 redemption packs. So it was better. I know SPA is a more expensive product, but the point is now it was just like buy a box and get 1 pack with like 3 or 4 cards, and it might have an autograph, but I got 2 redemption packs, didn't get any autographs. You know, the best I got was a Matty Beniers top shelf rookie.
I too got 2 redemption packs because I got 2 boxes, but I got a box of extended and a box of Series 2, which I haven't opened the Series 2 box yet. But yeah, so I got 2 redemption packs, and I actually pulled no autos too. So there you go. I think what was in there? The prominent cuts cards. I got a couple wrestlers. I believe I got MJF and what's her name? Dr. Britt Baker. Yes. Who's from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Just a fun fact. And I don't know what she's a doctor of. I think she might be a dentist. But anyway. Yeah, so there were 2 wrestling cards in there. I think I got the Connor McDavid prominent cuts and maybe Gretzky. And then the rest were the rookie ones. So, yeah, it was kind of disappointing because they cut way back on the free ones, but it's okay. I did find though, other than like quarter box, getting Penguins and stuff to fill in my team sets and all of those kind of things, and some Hall of Famers and stuff like that, I found another box too that I bought because I was going for some older wax. Was another one of my goals, is to see if I could find some older wax. And sure enough, Clemente was with me too on this one. We just happened by a table and I caught out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, whoa, there's an 0203 box of Upper Deck Series 2. And I'm thinking, okay, which one was in this one? Was this the Tim Thomas one or was this the Zetterberg one? And then I remembered Zetterberg was in Series 1. Tim Thomas is in Series 2, along with Jason Spezza and Brian Miller. So I was like, wonder what this guy wants for it. And it was $60 for this box. So I was like, I'm not going to pass that up. So I snagged that. So that should be a fun to open. Hopefully it's not bricked.
Hopefully not. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, hopefully it's not bricked.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll see.
I bought some vintage cards, and I didn't really have the time to look around. I know that like somebody came to my table and they had 2 Topps Tall Boy cards that I bought off of them that were in pretty decent shape. One of them is of Red Kelly, who's in the Hall of Fame. And so I'm like, all right, you know what? When you find Tall Boys in like decent condition and they're not like $30 each, go for it. I grabbed those. I know, Tim, you showed me that dealer that you bought the Gordie Howe from. I picked up a couple of 63, 64 Parkhurst cards. I'm like less than 20 cards away from finishing that set now. I mean, I got Henri Richard and Johnny Bauer and Jean Beliveau. I also picked up some 60, 61 Topps cards. That's another slow build, 66 cards. But I picked up cards of Eddie Shore, Joe Malone, and Lester Patrick. And even though those guys played in like the 20s and 30s, the 60-61 set had cards of all-time greats.
All-time greats,
yeah. It says that at the top, all-time greats. So, these were kind of cool cards. I saw that. I'm like, wow, hey, Lester Patrick, Eddie Shore, Joe Malone, right? But my big score was, Tim, you found this guy that had these really old hockey cards.
Yep.
And you were like, you should check this out. And I did. We did. We looked at it, and then I went back the next day and bought them.
Yeah, this was one of those ones where he had the cases of hockey cards, and I'm looking at him. He's like, oh, you like hockey cards, huh? I'm like, yeah. And I'm kind of browsing, and he's like, well, I got something back here you might like. And of course, when people say that to me, I immediately put an eyebrow up, like, where are you going with this, man?
Mm-hmm.
And he pulls out the stack that he had hidden behind the table. That is now your stack.
I told you I bought some cards from 64, 65, 63, 64, and 60, 61. So then I bought this lot of 27 cards. In this lot, there were 6 cards from 1933-34 O-Pee-Chee, 1933-34 Canadian Gum, 1933-34 Worldwide Gum Ice Kings, and 4 cards from 1912-13 Imperial Tobacco. So most of the cards were from 33-34, and then 4 of them were from 12-13. Now, I'm going to just tell you the rookie cards of the Hall of Famers that I got, because I'm not going to read out all 27 cards because many people won't know some of these players, but I will just read to you who I got. Rookie cards of Bill Cook, Hall of Fame, Cooney Wayland, Hall of Fame. I got 2 different rookie cards of Harvey Busher Jackson, who's in the Hall of Fame. They're all in the Hall of Fame. Mervyn Red Dutton, who was on the New York Americans, obviously in the Hall of Fame. Lionel Connicher, one of the all-time great Chicago Blackhawks. And Charlie Chuck Gardner, probably the first superstar goalie that the Blackhawks had. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame. He was on the team when they won the Stanley Cup in 34. Those were all like really awesome cards, but probably the one that I'm like the most geeked about is the 1912-13 Imperial Tobacco C57 card of Clint Benedict. And I will tell you why this card is so freaking awesome. Yes, he's in the Hall of Fame. He is the first goalie to wear a mask. He didn't wear it long. We had like a facial fracture. I think it was maybe a broken nose. He wore like this leather mask that covered like the bottom half of his face. Kind of creepy looking, but kind of cool. So he's the first goalie to wear a mask in an NHL game. However, he would fall down to stop the puck, and that wasn't allowed in the NHL for a bit in the league's history. It was allowed in other leagues, wasn't allowed in the NHL. He would drop to his knees, and he was given the nickname Praying Benny. And, you know, if he fell and made the save and they said it was, you know, oh, you meant to fall, they'd give him a 2-minute penalty and shrug it off. All right, fine, but I made the save. But a lot of times he would claim that he fell accidentally. Sometimes the referees couldn't tell. So finally, Frank Calder, the president of the NHL at the time, finally said, okay, you know what? Screw it. Goalies can fall down to make saves. They could do it in other leagues. Sure, they could do it in the NHL as well. And he made the comment, I'm going to pull the direct quote right here. This is from the book Saving Face, The Art and History of the Goalie Mask. And so Frank Calder, he says here, NHL referees couldn't tell the difference, but some hockey purists could and derided the practice. This is a falling on your knees to make a save. On January 9th, 1918, unable to stomach the blatant rule infringement any longer, NHL President Frank Calder simply dropped the rule itself. And he said, in the future, they can fall on their knees or stand on their heads if they think they can stop the puck better in that way than by standing on their feet. And this is believed to be the origin of the saying, standing on their head, when a player has a good game, specifically a goalie has a good game or a great game. He's standing on his head, right? So that is thanks to Clint Benedict. And so you kids can keep your PSA 10 Connor McDavid's, and I will be happy with my PSA 2 Clint Benedict rookie card.
I mean, what more do you need than that?
Well said.
Every card has a story, and there you go. There's a story with that one. That's the whole reason why, because I saw all those, and I immediately was like, yeah, Sal has to come see this table. I'm just glad he still had them.
You don't see stuff like this every day. And I mean, I look through this, and I mean, you know, I have like 4 or 5 rookie cards of players on the first Blackhawks Stanley Cup team.
I mean, like I said, I go back to the point I made earlier. Stuff that gets this old, you don't see it not slabbed anymore. You don't find this stuff raw anymore because everybody that had it has gotten it put in some kind of case. Finding this stuff that's like you could still pick it up and touch it is awesome.
So as I mentioned before, the 2024 show is going to be in Cleveland. The 2025 National will return to Chicago. The 2026 show, it's up in the air. There's actually been a rumor that I will help perpetuate that it'll be back in Chicago in 2026. So 2 years in a row in Chicago. Will that really happen? I don't know. I mean, you know, there's Atlantic City, there's Baltimore, there's a lot of places that have hosted the National in the past and will probably host it again. But yeah.
It's down to 3 places. It's either Chicago, Atlantic City, or Atlanta.
Ooh,
So it's going to be one of those places.
don't want Atlanta.
I think a lot of people actually do want Atlanta.
Because it's never been down. It hasn't been down there in like forever.
It's been a while, yeah. I think they've hosted 2 times or 3 times before, but it hasn't been down there in quite a few years. So I know the popular choice seems to be not Atlantic City, anything but Atlantic City, but I guess the convention center there has been lobbying pretty hard, including offering to knock money off of dealer tables. So I guess we'll see once the votes are tallied.
Well, any final thoughts, gentlemen? Because this show has been almost as long as the National itself, or so it feels like it.
Well, I can wrap up by saying this is probably the most fun I've ever had at a National. And this was my 9th or 10th. So that's saying something.
And that's because you didn't bring the wife and kids this time?
No, has nothing to do with that.
Because you had more than a day?
No, it's just
Got to hang out with your pals.
I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I got to see a lot of cool stuff. I got to talk to a lot of cool people. I mean, it was fun.
No, I agree with Tim that it was probably the most fun I ever had at any card show, and I hope that we haven't reached peak National, that we can't surpass this. I hope we can, because it would be great to do so. I agree also that bringing it back to Atlantic City would not do that. So, well, we shall see. I mean, for selfish reasons, I probably want AC because I'm in New York and it's closer to get to. But in a lot of ways, taking a bus down to Atlantic City to a venue that's not so great, as opposed to flying 2.5 hours and being in a place that is very conducive to the National with hotels and restaurants, and the airport is literally 3 minutes away. It's hard to beat, but we'll see. But having said that, I think, the National hangover will last, for me, I think, a little longer, and hopefully I can rest off this week and be ready and fit for future card shows.
Well, all right then. I think we've said everything that needs to be said. So we had a good time. And if you went to the National and want to share your thoughts, reach out to us on social media or on the Facebook group. And until next time, collect what you like.
For more hockey goodness, follow us on Twitter @PuckJunk.